Welcome everybody. I'm glad to see you haven't been blown up by the wind or dissolved in the overnight rains. I will be very brief today. I mean, just to introduce Pierre Rosenberg's lecture on the Sacrements. I should mention, say it in the French way, and also to remind you that this is the second of 3 lectures and that there will be a symposium after that, but I will mention that at the end of the lecture. So, without saying too much, we look forward.
Thank you so much. The acquisition by the Fitzwilliam Museum of the Extreme Unction, the first picture of the first set of the Sacrements, quite recently, is of course a great event, and you should be very proud of this marvelous acquisition, which is a great event, of course, and the way in which you were able to bring this acquisition to a good end is an example. And the only thing I would like to add is, of course, that I hope that the entire set of what's remaining of the entire set will one day be here. I will tell you how many pictures still are able to arrive at the Fitzwilliam. In any case, it's really a great moment, I think, for the Fitzwilliam to have been able to buy these pictures. The 2 sets of the Sacrements are, of course, a unique event in the history of of art in the 17th century. The 2 sets of which, of course, I will be speaking a lot. It's perhaps the most ambitious of all the ambitions of Poussin, the most ambitious of all the things he tried to do. But he really, on every point of view, on the intellectual point of view, on the pictorial point of view, on every point of view, I think it's really a great event and a great ambition of this very ambitious painter. Why 7 Sacrements? Why this very strange subject of 7 Sacrements, which was so seldomly treated in art, very seldomly treated before Poussin? Why this subject? Who is behind the commission of the first set and of the second set? Why did Poussin put so much of his energy in the creation of the 7 pictures of each set? I will try to say this before. Before Poussin, very few pictures treated the theme. I showed you here Roger van der Weyden picture of the same themes, the 7 Sacraments, of course completely different to the Poussin picture, and of course, but that's later than Poussin, the very famous picture from the same 7th Sacrament by Crespi in the Gemäldegallery in Dresden. I have chosen to show you only one of the picture, and of course I have chosen, because of Cambridge and of course because of the Fitzwilliam, the same themes, that means the extreme unction. The number 7 has been is becoming official after the fourth Council of the Lateran in 1215, and it's a very important. It's in the Sacraments are quite important in the among the Catholics, and the Council of Trento, of course, was quite important also in defending the theme. Of course, I will be coming back quite soon on the ambition that Poussin had in treating this subject. 7 pictures, 7 major events of the life of each Christian. 4 pictures are connected with the life of Christ. This is the first set of the life of Christ, the baptism of Christ, la pénitence, penance, that means Christ at the feast in the house of Simon, Eucharistic, and ordination. Eucharistic means the Last Supper, and ordination, order. 1 is concerning the life of the Virgin, the marriage of the Virgin, and 2, confirmation and extreme unction are events in the life of each of us, but very important for the history of the beginnings of the Roman Christianity. Poussin painted twice the Sacraments. The first time, you have them on the screen, for Cassiano del Pozzo, 1588, 1657, and the second time for Paul Fréard de Chanteloup, 1609-1694. That's the second set, which you will be seeing here. We know for the second set the precise date of each of the picture and in the order in which Poussin painted them. That is the second set. At the reverse, for the first set, the picture in Cambridge is part of the first set, we know nothing. We don't know in which order he painted them. We don't know the date of the pictures. And we know only that one picture, the baptism of Christ, which is now in the National Gallery in Washington, was painted as the last of the 7th picture, and in Paris, where Poussin brought with him, when he came to Paris, the canvas and finished it in Paris. So we know everything about the second set. Not everything, you will see why. We know more or less nothing about the first set. Nothing, that's also a little bit exaggerated. Why did we know so few about the first set, which, as I said before, was finished in Paris in 1642? And why are we knowing so much more about the second set? For a very simple reason. The second set was ordered by Chanteloup, who lived in Paris. Poussin was in Rome, and he was there for the rest of his life. And of course, there was a great exchange of letters between Chanteloup and Poussin. Poussin wrote regularly to Chanteloup, and told him where he was with the picture, how far he was with his picture. He tried to convince him that he was working hard, which was not only true. He told him that he was ill, that he had a headache, that it was too hot, that it was too cold. In any case, the letters are very precise, and that's, for instance, a letter by Poussin. And so in a certain way, we are very much informed about the order in which Poussin painted the pictures, the time he needed for each of them, the price he asked for each of them. So we are very well informed for the second set. For the first set, of course, we know very few things because, of course, by the fact that Cassiano lived in Rome as Poussin, there are no letters. So in a certain way, we don't know exactly what happens. A word about the letters. They were published in 1911, the letters by Poussin, but alas, it's written in a very French, in a very approximative French or in a very approximative Italian. They are very beautiful in a certain way. They're very moving very often. And of course, a new edition is deeply aspected. And alas, the death of Jacques Tuillier quite recently, he was planning to publish such a new edition of the letters, makes that we still are living on the 1911 edition. The letters are very beautiful. Alas, we know the letters by Poussin to Chanteloup. We don't know the letters, the answers of Chanteloup to the letter. As I said before, the first set, painted for Cassiano dal Pozzo, were done in Rome for a man who lived himself in Rome. The exchanges between the two men are very often. They had great exchanges, each of them. And of course, exactly what they said each to the other, we don't know. And of course, we have a little bit to imagine what were the conversation between these two persons. You have on the screen a portrait of Cassiano dal Pozzo. He was a very important figure. He was the greatest. I spoke of him last week, and you remember that in French we call him Dupuis dal Pozzo. And of course, that Poussin, for the picture he painted for him, very often introduced a pond, allusion to his name. In any case, he is one of the most interesting figure of connoisseurship and of knowledge in Rome in the 17th century. He was born in Turin, educated in Bologna and in Pisa. He was a great friend of Galileo. He became a member of the Accademia dei Lincei. In the 17th century, the Accademia dei Lincei was reserved. You had to be a bachelor to be a member of the Accademia dei Lincei. By chance, things have changed. Being myself like a Lincei, not being a bachelor, by chance, things have changed since the 17th century. He had tremendous knowledge. He was a great friend of Peresque, who called him La Fleur des Bons Amis. Of course, he was very near of the Pope, Urban VIII, Pope Barberini, who died in 1644, and he traveled with him to Paris, to Spain, etc. Via Chiavari, where he lived, there was a sort of great museum that he built, a great museum of medals, of stones, of a lot of, and you have a portrait by him, but I'll show you another portrait of him. He was interested in everything in a certain way, the manuscript by Leonardo da Vinci, and of course his great proudness was the so-called Museo Cartaceo. Many drawings, 1,500 drawings are kept in Windsor, drawings where he tried to bring together everything one could know about the past, the Roman past, about flowers, about the curiosity of the men was immense, and most of the learned artists in Rome in the 17th century tried to approach him, to work for him. I'm among the minority of scholars thinking that Poussin did not really do drawings for Cassiano dal Pozzo, but other scholars are thinking that some of the drawings of the Museo Cartaceo are by Poussin, which I don't think is right. In any case, Cassiano dal Pozzo is a very interesting figure, one of the most very learned men and a very educated man, and the friendship between Cassiano and Poussin is something crucial to understand. First, of course, Cassiano's knowledge and admiration for the painter, but secondly also the openness of the mind and the brightness of the mind of Poussin. That are some of the drawings of the Museo Cartaceo. Let's have an example here. Drawing ascribed to Pietro da Cortona, copying Roman monuments. These are other, you see, the sort of documents he was trying to keep, and in this huge ambitions, a little bit as in the 18th century, the encyclopedia tried to do so. That means to bring together as much as what one could know about the past. Of course, the main interest of Cassiano was not everything concerning the primitive church of the first years in Rome. And of course, one of the proudness of the Cassiano dal Pozzo collection was the copy he made of the mosaic of Palestrina, which Poussin did know, which Poussin copied, and which Poussin introduced in some of his late pictures. Especially, you see there are some Egyptians allusions that were quite important for the old Poussin when he tried to combine Christianity and the religions of the past of the Egyptians. Cassiano had a huge collection of pictures by Poussin, some 40 pictures, a huge collection. I will show you 3 pictures by as there are. A collection which one has to study very carefully. That's a very early picture. This is in Aurora at Hovingham Hall, the collection of Worsley collection, quite early picture. And this is a very important picture in Boston, Venus and Mars. Quite a beautiful picture a little bit later, and and of course he owned this great masterpiece in Frankfurt, Pyramus and Thisbe, with this huge sky and this tempest. I mean, the event, the death of the hero is of course minor in this huge of the nature, which is completely overwhelming the event. Small event in a gigantic nature. It's a great picture. Cassiano collected Poussin deeply, and of course he put together this huge collection, not only of pictures by Poussin, and of course the reconstruction, the reconstitution of the collection of Cassiano is something quite important and very difficult to do. Many scholars are working on the reconstruction of the collection of Cassiano dal Pozzo, Timothy Standring, Arnaud Brejon de la Vernier, Donatella Sparti, and in fact we know the collection through different inventory. This is, for instance, a page of the inventory of 1689. There are half a dozen of inventories, and one is trying to follow the pictures in the different inventories. It's a huge work which is not completed, and on which I myself have, of course, to work quite a lot to bring together what the collection really was. We will go back, of course, to Cassiano quite soon. After his death, one has to ask what was the role exactly of Cassiano in the invention of this theme. Was he really behind the suggestion of painting the subject of the Seventh Sacrament? Was it an idea of Poussin? We really don't know. I think, of course, that the role of Cassiano was absolutely crucial. Cassiano himself, and this was a great discussion, was he religiously very strong on the religious point of view? Was he a devote, as one thinks now he was? Or was he also attached to a more liberal movement, more open to other ideas? It's a discussion which is very open between for instance, the opinion of Blunt and Haskell, who were in favor of Cassiano more open to new ideas, more open to all forms of religion, and to the actual tendency who makes of Cassiano a real strong religious devout. Sublé Desnoyers, whose image you will see quite soon, thought of him that he was the head of the chef des vertueux, the head of the virtuous men. This is Cassiano del Pozzo, who ordered the first set of the 7 sacraments. The second set, as I said before, were ordered by Chanteloup. Paul Fréard de Chanteloup, of which I cannot show you an image. That's an image of his brother, Roland Fréard de Chanteloup. Strangely enough, I have tried to find a photo of a reproduction of his portrait. I did not find a portrait of Paul Fréard de Chanteloup, which is quite strange. I have to work more because, I mean, he's such an important figure for Poussin, and especially known because he was the translator and the guide of Bernini when Bernini came to Paris in 1665, and he wrote this marvelous diary of the trip of Bernini in Paris in 1665. So no portraits of Paul Fréard de Chanteloup. This is a portrait of his brother, who was a great scholar in the field of architecture and a great friend also of Poussin. But of Paul Fréard de Chanteloup, I have no portraits to present to you. He came from a great family in Le Mans, and he went to Italy more than once. He had a very important mission to bring back to Paris in 1640 Poussin, who was very reluctant to come back to Paris. He was very happy in Rome, and it was only under the pressure of the king and of Richelieu, the Cardinal de Richelieu, that he was trapped to go back to Paris. In any case, to bring him back from Paris, the king sent Chanteloup to Rome to bring him back. He was also, as Cassiano del Pozzo, interested in Leonardo da Vinci. We know quite a lot of himself, but he was also, of course, a great collector of pictures by Poussin. He owned himself a quite great number of pictures, not perhaps 40, but not far off 40 himself. He was protected by Sublé Desnoyers, who was, in a certain way, the Minister of Culture of Richelieu. A quite important figure of the intellectual life in Paris in these years, in a moment where the French crown, Richelieu, the king, tried to bring, if I can say so, Rome to Paris, in a moment where Paris was trying to bring to Paris the great artists of Rome, but also to bring to Paris, to replace Rome, and in a very active way. In any case, Chanteloup was also a great collector, and he bought not this picture, but another version of this picture. And I have asked Paul Jaunides some years ago, who is among us today, to find me the version owned by Chanteloup, which Chanteloup considered himself as being by Raphael. The version sold in London in 1953 and disappeared since then. And I very much would like to find this version and to be able to compare it to the version in the Pitti Palace in Florence. In any case, he bought a version of this picture, of which he was very proud, of which he was convinced that it was the best version of the composition. And he ordered to Poussin this picture, which is a sort of which is an homage to Raphael, of course. And Poussin himself wrote that he was very ashamed to be able, that he was not at the level of Raphael, that Raphael was a great master. But the admiration of Poussin for Raphael was immense, and in a certain way his ambition was to be the Raphael of the 17th century. In any case, this little picture, which is kept in Sarasota, is a very beautiful picture, which later on was in the collection of Hugh d'Orléans, of which I will be speaking quite soon. Sarasota in Florida. The visitors in Rome who came to Rome all went to Via Chiavari to see the pictures owned by Cassiano. And of course, in the 17th century, you could not go to Rome without looking at this immense collection and admiring the pictures. But Dal Pazzo, the family of Dal Pozzo, became quite poor, and they were trying desperately to find money and to sell the pictures. They were riddled by debts and looking desperately to find money. In 722, one of the descendants of Cassiano tried to sell the picture for 6,000 écus scudi, but did not find someone able to pay this amount of money. In 725, August the Strong, the elector of Saxa, finds the picture of the Saxony, found the pictures too expensive and did not buy them. In 729, things went a little bit more far. The two directors of the French Academy in Rome, Pierre de Lestache and the painter Nicolas Vleugels, whose image you have here, tried to buy the pictures for 8,000 scudi, but the answer of the director of the cultural minister of the time, Le Duc d'Antin, was very disappointing for Vleugels. He wrote, don't think to buy the pictures. The Cardinal de Fleury, who was more or less the prime minister in this time, prefers to pay his debts to the state of the states and not to buy the pictures and not to buy the picture. What a mistake, of course, not to have what a mistake to have not bought the pictures and to have preferred to pay the debts of the state. In 745, Sir Robert Walpole tried to buy the pictures, but the Pope of the time, Benedetto XV, forbids the exportation of the pictures. But the Dal Pozzo were still trying to sell the pictures, but the price increased every year, more or less. 20,000 scudi were asked in 756. Another attempt, which did not succeed neither, was tried by Henry Welbor Hagar, but Gavin Hamilton, the painter, was against the acquisition. It's a Scottish dealer, James Burrs, who succeeded in bringing the pictures out of Italy in a very strange way. We know perfectly well what happened because of the letters exchanged between James Burrs and Sir Joshua Reynolds. The great correspondence, which has been recently republished by John Ingemels and John Edgecombe. Reynolds had convinced Charles Manners, 4th Duke of Rutland, to buy the picture for £2,000. But how to do it, because one did know that the Pope was against the exportation of the picture. Burrs asked a Flemish painter, a Belgian painter would we say nowadays, André de Munch, to make copies of the original. So, and to make copies and to export the originals, and in order that the visitors could see in seeing the copies that they were the originals. And he succeeded in a way in doing so. The 29th of August, 786, Reynolds wrote, "The pictures are in the river," and the river means the Thames. And the 7th of September, he wrote, "Rome is now much poorer, as England is richer than it was." I mean, he smuggled the picture out of Italy in a very strange way. And he wrote also, I'm speaking of Reynolds, "I have not the last scruple about the sending copies about the sending of the sending copies for the originals." So in a way, it's he smuggled out the picture in this not very good way. Reynolds, when the picture arrived in London, asked a certain Nicolas Biondi to restore them and ask new frames, because the original frames, I will go back to this point very soon, were kept with the copies. And he ordered copies for each of the new pictures for £10, 10 guineas each. The pictures were exhibited in the same year, that means 787. It's at the Royal Academy. George III went to see them the 27th of April. Burrs, who of course is behind the exportation of the picture, was very afraid of what could happen to him in Rome, and he was very afraid. The worst, he says, the worst consequences to me here would happen if one would know the role he had played in the illegal exportation of the pictures. The pictures remained in the collection generation after generation at Belvoir Castle in the Lincolnshire. You have a portrait of Reynolds, a man who was behind the exportation of the picture in 786. What happened to the seventh picture of the collection of Cassiano dal Pozzo after the entry in England? There's a lot of little. The first 1860, the penitence burned. So this picture has disappeared since 1816. In 1939, the baptism, the picture achieved, painted in Paris in 1642, was sold to Wildenstein, who resold the picture in 1944 to the National Gallery in Washington. The order was bought by the Kimball Art Museum in Fort Worth in 2010. And as I said before, you bought very cleverly the, no, that's not what was, that's the, you bought the Extreme Unction. You have on the screen the copy of the Extreme Unction who remains in Rome, in the family of Cassiano dal Pozzo, among the heirs of Cassiano dal Pozzo. What's interesting on this image is that you see the original frames of the pictures, one of the original frames of the pictures. Of course, the frames of the set you have here, which you can see at the Phil Williams, are the frames that I mentioned, which have been made at the arrival of the picture in London at the end of the 17th century. In 1994-95, when I did the Poussin exhibition at the Louvre in Paris, I presented the two sets together. The Rutlands very generously lent to me the 5 pictures kept in these years. And I was, of course, able to borrow the picture of the National Gallery in Washington. And, of course, I borrowed also the picture you have here. I borrowed also the penitence, that means the copy of the penance, which, as I said before, was burnt in 1860. So on one wall, you had the 7 sacraments from the Cassiano dal Pozzo collection. On the other wall, you had the 7 sacraments of the second set, the Chanteloup set, which you, as I said, have not said before, is kept in Edinburgh at the National Gallery. I will go back to this quite soon. In fact, I mentioned 7 pictures, and in fact there are 7 sacraments in the first set of Cassiano dal Pozzo. In fact, there are 8 pictures. And the travelers going to Rome to see the Cassiano dal Pozzo set were always a little bit embarrassed to see 8 pictures and not 7. And in fact, Poussin, in the first time, painted this picture, the St. John Baptism, the people, which is kept at the John Paul Getty Museum, sold also by the Rutland family, but after the Second World War. And in fact, this picture is a sort of first essay, if I can say so, a first treatment. I mean, I think that Cassiano and Poussin agreed when they decided to paint the Sacrements to try to do a first picture. And this is this picture which is kept at the Getty. The fact that you have a baptism of Christ on one hand and St. John baptism, the people on the other hand, confused the visitors in Rome in the 18th century, and all of them were very much embarrassed by the fact that of the confusion of the two pictures. This is a picture which has been terribly damaged by a stupid restoration after the war, where part of what Poussin had painted had been really was cancelled by the restorer. One word now about the second set, the set which is now in Edinburgh, the one ordered by Cassiano, the one ordered by Chanteloup. Chanteloup was very jealous of the first set and was willing desperately to get something which we would record the first set. He tried to get copies from Poussin. He asked Poussin to do copies of the first set. Poussin refused. Poussin refused also to try to find good copies to his set. Cassiano himself was very reluctant to ask to painters to make copies. The idea of making tapestries after the first set was also refused, and suddenly, precisely the 14th of April, 1644, Poussin decided to do a new set, to do another set of the Seven Sacraments, this time for Chanteloup, after having resisted desperately. The new set, you have it here, is complete, and that's the Cassiano del Pozzo set, I'm sorry. The new set is here, it's complete, and is, as you know, still in the possession of the, it's on loan to Edinburgh, and still in the possession of the Duke of Sutherland. What happened to the Chanteloup set? Chanteloup was very proud of his set, and very proud of his set, and showed it very often, and you will see with great admiration. People visiting his house had a great admiration for the seven pictures, which were kept in a special room, covered, each picture covered by a little curtain that one had to open to see the pictures, a little curtain of green velvet. Chanteloup dies in 1694, and his heirs try to sell the picture immediately, 70,000 pounds, livres. Of course, the heir was a nephew of Chanteloup. He offered the picture to Louis XIV, but the king could not accept gifts, or at least when he accepted a gift, he had to give something in exchange to this gift. That means to pay, in fact, the picture. So the king refused to buy the picture in 1694. That was Louis XIV. At the death in 707 of the heir of Chanteloup, the king, still Louis XIV, refused to buy the picture. In 712, the picture were bought by a Dutch dealer, Jacques Meyers. He tried to sell them to my Lord Marlborough, but the price was too expensive, 50,000 scudi. And he tries to sell them also to James Bridge of Chandos, who also tried to buy them, but also the acquisition did not work. At the end, the Duc d'Orléans, whose image we saw before, bought them, and it was his great proudness to have these pictures in Paris. He bought them in 717, and the same year, Sir James Thornhill could admire the picture when he visited the Palais Royal, where the Duc d'Orléans lived. But exactly in the same condition as what happened to Cassiano del Pozzo, the heirs of the Duc d'Orléans had many debts and had to pay the debts. So the future Philippe Égalité, the grandson of the regent, the Duc d'Orléans, the regent, decided to sell them in 791. In 793, François Laborde de Méréville bought all the French and Italian pictures of the collection of the Duc d'Orléans, and for huge amounts of money, and brought them to London and sold them for 40,000 pounds to a banker, Jeremiah Harman, who sold them for 43,000 pounds to Michael Bryan. At the end, the sacraments are bought by Francis Egerton, 3rd Duke of Bridgewater, for 4,900 guineas. They are still, as you know all, kept by the Duke of Sutherland, who has sent them on view at the National Gallery of Scotland since 1968. So in a certain way, the two sets of the sacraments, the most important enterprise of Poussin, were all the 14 pictures, at least all the 15 pictures, together in England between 793 and 1816. That means 11 in our days are still in England, and I hope forever. That's the first set, and I'm going back to the second set. The two sets are quite different, one from the other. The size are not the same. The Chanteloup picture are bigger than the Cassiano picture. As I said before, we know precisely how many, that the 7 pictures of the second set were painted in 4 years. We know nothing about the date of the execution of the 7 pictures of 6 of the 7 pictures of the first set. We know the order of the execution of all the pictures of the second set. We know only that the baptism of Christ was executed as the last picture of the set. We don't know exactly why Poussin decided to paint the picture in an order which is not the order of the life of the human life. He painted them in a disorder, and we don't know. We know the order in which he painted the second set, but this disorder of the second set is not the disorder of the certain set. So in a certain way, we are in a very strange situation of knowing a lot of the Edinburgh picture and being in great absence of knowledge for the first set, absence of knowledge on the point of view of the date, which is a part which has a huge discussion among scholars, the date of each of, and we don't know exactly why Poussin decided to paint them in this order, why he did not follow the logical order of the human life, beginning with the birth, with the marriage of the Virgin, until the extreme unction. We know, of course, also that he used to prepare his pictures by many drawings that you have on the screen, 2 examples of drawings for 2 pictures, but there are many more, of course. We know far more drawings for the second set than for the third set. The problem of the box that Poussin used to paint the picture is a problem which I think will be treated at the Fitzwilliam Museum quite soon, with a little exhibition which will be open, or is perhaps open, will be open quite soon, to try to explain how Poussin managed to construct his pictures. So this is quite interesting. We know also quite a lot about the price of the pictures. And we know also that Poussin was very much aware of the way in which the pictures were sent to Paris, and he was very much keen about how they were kept, transported. At a certain point, one of the couriers who brought one of the pictures to Paris was killed between Turin and Susa, and there is a letter by Poussin who says he's dead, but alas, by chance the picture is safe. For him, the picture was far more important than the courier. So in a certain way, the two sets, the history of the two sets is quite amusing to follow in a certain way, because it's also the history of taste, and with financial problems, power problems. The Duc d'Orléans really brings the picture back to France for proudness. Reynolds brings the first set to England for proudness, proves the greatness of the admiration for Poussin on one hand, and also the power of England to bring such masterpieces to England. So there's a lot of implications which are quite interesting to follow. But let us go back to your picture. You see the extreme unction painted in the way in which the old Roman Church thought that a soldier had to die. the picture looks a little as a sarcophagus and is remembering, of course, the death of Germanicus of 1627. The sarcophagus idea, this idea of a composition completely on one's plan is quite obvious here. And you see each figure is presented in a very different way. I will present you some details of the picture. I will insist on some details of the pictures, which proves how carefully Poussin insisted on the picture. The picture was highly admired, and Bellori, Félibien, all the great 17th century writers described the picture very carefully in any details. Every figure, every detail is very carefully analyzed. Before going to the to go back to the Fitzwilliam picture, you see how different one is from the other on the point of view of color, especially. One is clear, brilliant, and the other one is more obscure. The one is more elegant, the second one is more deep, more moving, more touching. So in a way, as Poussin, in a way, Poussin does two very different pictures. In a certain way, Poussin, after 1628-29, hated to repeat himself. He repeated quite often his pictures in the early years, but after setting, he hated to redo twice the same picture, and that's the reason, because in a way he refused to copy his own pictures, and the reason why he decided also to do a complete different set. So, to go back to your picture, you see some details here, for instance, a priest who opens the eyelids of the dead Roman soldier. You see how the brilliance of the color, and in a certain way, the very expressive feelings. And it had also here, and more details about the picture. You see that's the wife of the dead soldier, and assistant on the background, other details. And the open window here. And I would like to insist, the descriptions are very clear from in the text, and each figure has this meaning. More the people around the dead men, more they are nearer of him. That means father, mother, widow, and so on. More the expression of the faces are different. But I would like to insist on this detail, which is, of course, a very beautiful figure. You see a woman going out of the room. For a long time, we thought that the figure going out of the room was a pure decorative element. It had no real meaning. It was there to give to the picture something, sort of elegance in a certain way. In fact, we know perfectly well what Poussin tried to do. A scholar called Stanik explained that, in fact, the figure was inspired by an engraving from after Otto van Venius, Otto van Wien. And this engraving is a symbol of youth and of beauty, who are introducing in the image of death an accent of hope. So there, in a way, this picture, all the meaning of the picture is there completed by this image, very elegant image, a very beautiful figure, which was once thought for a long time without meaning. In fact, it's the meaning, of course, of hope, which is, after all, what we all hope after our death. The Edinburgh picture is, as I said before, quite different. It's dark. It's painted between the 14th of April 44 and the 2 October 44 also. It's the first picture of the second set in order. It was painted in 6 months, which is quite quick for Poussin. The picture is difficult, I say, the image I have is not very good, I have to say. The figures are the same, but disposed in a completely different way, and the expression of each of the faces is also quite different. Also there, I will show you some details. First, some drawings. this drawing, which is a very complete drawing of the composition, one of these very definitive drawings of Poussin, where he used brushwork on where he's interested in lightning, especially more than in the details of the figures. And a drawing which is not published in my catalogue raisonné of Poussin's drawing because it appeared more recently. I saw the drawings Friday in London. It's a drawing which is not absolutely sure. It's something new. It's a technique which Poussin did not use very often. It's not exactly what one is expecting. I resisted for a long time to accept the attribution which was proposed by Anne Suttle and Harris, and now I have to say I have accepted the attribution in spite of a drawing being quite different of what one is expecting from Poussin, especially if you compare the drawing with the former one. So some details of the picture, of the Edinburgh picture, of things where you see that the ambition is quite more tragic in a certain way, more some figures are quite impressive, as one of the men over the body of the dead soldier. And and another detail. And here's a widow still at the bed, and I'll show you here a copy of this detail by Degas. Degas did 2 copies of the picture of what I have read. I have been able only to find this copy. The other one, I don't know where it is. Everyone says 2 copies. I would like to find the other one. I don't know where the second one has disappeared. You see that the second picture is more closed, more constructed in a more closed way. The windows are no more existing. All the atmosphere is quite different. Cassiano, of course, went to see the new picture, the one done for Chanteloup, for your picture. And Poussin writes to Chanteloup, but of course he writes to Chanteloup, so one has to be a little bit cautious about what he says. He was very much surprised because the subject that I painted for Chanteloup is quite different from yours. And in fact, he says, Poussin, I'm not sure it's true, Cassiano said that your picture is better than his own picture. Of course, I think that Poussin wrote this to Chanteloup in order to please him. Before ending, I would like to read a short passage of Bernini when he went to see the picture in Paris in July '65. He looked at it. Standing for a while, and then got onto his knees to see it better, changing his glasses from time to time and showing his amazement without saying anything. At last he got up and said that its effect on him was like that of a great sermon, to which one listens with the deepest attention and goes away in silence while enjoying the inner experience. A great admiration of Bernini for Poussin. I will go back to this point later on, not today, but later on, because in fact the admiration of Bernini, the symbol of Baroque, for Poussin, the symbol of classicism, Baroque and classicism, 2 words I hate to use, is proving that the terms used by art historians have to be kept with great care. Well, what is the most beautiful series? What is between? Is it the Cassiano dal Pozzo series or the Chanteloup one? The discussion went on and on in the 17th and 18th century, and for instance, Richardson, Legels, Reynolds preferred the first series. The first series has more, the Dal Pozzo series has more invention, it's more fresh, is more spontaneous. The Chanteloup series is done with the greatest vision of the whole of the set. The idea, as I said before, is a Cassiano dal Pozzo idea. But I mean, more than that is difficult to say. The scholars have tried read the pictures in their own way. I spoke before, Bellory, Félibien. I should mention Blunt, Dempsey, Richard Verdi, and so on. The idea, of course, is to insist on Stoicism and of the syncretism between the world of the first church and the world before Christianity. Of course, the idea behind each picture is the idea of exemplarity. I have mentioned Bernini. I should end my lecture in mentioning him once more. The same day, he went on a little walk with Chanteloup, and he said, "Non mi posso levar dal pensiero di questi suoi quadri, non mi posso levar del pensiero di questi quadri, I cannot keep out of my mind the idea of these pictures." And in fact, once you spend your time in looking at the picture, if you stayed a long time in front of it, if you try to analyze each picture, you see that these pictures, which are needs a lot of time to be understood. They are very difficult pictures, but each time when you enter in them, you cannot be not moved by the ambition, by the greatness, and by the emotion that each of the picture brings to you. Poussin, of course, is a difficult painter. He tries to speak to us with his brushes and not with his with words, and he succeeds in doing so. But one has to enter in the world slowly and spending the time one needs, which is a little bit reverse of what we do now with contemporary picture. We are looking so quickly. So need to enter in the picture. You who have the chance to live with the picture now in your city, to enter in the picture, take your time and try to enter in this world, of this ambitious world of what a painter should be. That means a symbol of ambition and of the greatness of painting. Thank you.